What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I just woke up, and check this out. This is my announcer voice. What's going on, everybody? This is Rob, and today, in this video, we're going to be discussing the Easter eggs of Doctor Strange 2. And so if this is of particular interest to you, then make sure you like and subscribe, and whatever else helps us succeed in the algorithm. Yeah, this is my morning voice. So yeah, I don't know. People say they love it. I don't know. I've been listening to it for a long time. So let's talk about the Easter eggs in Doctor Strange 2. Let's kind of get this out of the way first, right? And then we'll get into the spoiler review segment. So one thing to know, we're not doing these Easter eggs in particular order of when they appeared in the movie. We just noticed them. But one of the cool things here is the entire movie's plot is a reference to Loki, which was actually confirmed by Kevin Feige. And quoting here, he said, "Loki and Sylvie did something at the end of the series that allowed all of this to be possible. He who remains is gone, and that allowed a spell to go wrong in Spider-Man No Way Home, which leads to the entire multiverse going quite mad in this." Now, the funny thing about this is that really there was only one reference to the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, and it was basically Doctor Strange explaining to America Chavez the fact that that's their only real involvement in the multiverse. But seemingly, and as I understand it, there's been statements that have come out from the creative side of Doctor Strange 2, where they basically said, okay, so like what took place in Spider-Man No Way Home was because of what happened in Loki, in terms of all the multiversal madness and everything. The spell going wrong was actually due to Loki, not really due to Peter Parker. And this really seems to fit that as well, that with the greater multiverse out there now, that seemingly this is all done because of the events of Loki. So a cool little moment there. Now, the other thing here, the next little Easter egg we saw, and it's not really an Easter egg, but it really is, if you're familiar with comics, is the Book of Vishanti. So if you're not familiar with comics, the Book of Vishanti is quite literally what you're told in the movie, which is basically this book that is the antithesis to the Darkhold, right? If the Darkhold is a book of pure evil, the Vishanti, or the Book of the Vishanti, is a book of pure good. In the comics, it's a lot more significant than that. So in the comics, the Book of Vishanti is like the magical book, right? I mean, it really is, in a lot of ways, the antithesis to the Darkhold, but like 80% of Doctor Strange's power comes from the Triumvirate, right? Comes from the Vishanti, which are just these wildly powerful magical beings. The way in which the role of the Sorcerer Supreme works is that that person is chosen by the Vishanti, right? It's not a title that the previous Ancient One, the previous Sorcerer Supreme can just pass on to another person. That what happens is that whenever the Sorcerer Supreme at that point in time dies, their essence or their soul or whatever you want to call it goes into the ether, where basically it merges with the rest of magical energy in existence. When that happens, it triggers the Vishanti becoming aware of the fact that the Sorcerer Supreme is dead, and a process is initiated whereby a new Sorcerer Supreme is chosen. Now, 9 times out of 10, it's usually the disciple of the existing Sorcerer Supreme, for the same reason that people date people in their social group, because you're socially vetted. People know you're legit. It's basically the same thing here, right? Like, the Vishanti don't usually just grab some rando out there. It's why Stephen Strange became the new Sorcerer Supreme after the passing of the Ancient One, because Stephen Strange was the disciple of the Sorcerer Supreme. So it is cool, right? It's not necessarily an absolute, right? For every rule, there's an exception to the rule. But the Vishanti are hugely powerful beings. What this does is it opens the doorway for presumably the existence of the Vishanti. We don't necessarily know if we'll see them, but to give you guys perspective here in terms of how much power Doctor Strange derives from them in the comics, there was a story where Doctor Strange refused to fight on behalf of the Vishanti in a magical war. So they stripped him of all the power they provided, which was like 80% of the power he had. And then they took away his role as Sorcerer Supreme and gave it to a guy named Jericho Drum, also known as Brother Voodoo, who ended up becoming Dr. Voodoo when he became the new Sorcerer Supreme. Ultimately, of course, Stephen Strange got the role back and so on and so forth. But that's the kind of people that we're dealing with here. So it's a really cool little Easter egg if you're familiar with comics. Now, a really cool little moment is the whole Gargantos Kaiju music that's playing in the background. It's a homage to the Godzilla monster movie archetype, right? It's not necessarily the music of Godzilla, not that I'm aware of, although it would have been cool if it was. I doubt that Disney has the rights to that. But it would have been a cool little thing, right? If it had just been like the music of Godzilla there. But, you know, Gargantos, it's Shumagorath. But I'm going to be honest with you guys, kind of an aside here. I'm sort of glad that wasn't really Shumagorath. I mean, it was Gargantos, but, well, it was Shumagorath acting like Gargantos. Here's the thing. Shumagorath is not a being that gets summoned, right, by like Wanda. That does not happen. Shumagorath conquers entire realities. This guy's an absolute hoss. There's whole universes out there that have been enslaved by the power of Shumagorath. So he's way up there. He's not just a monster who is summoned by Wanda for the purpose of tracking someone in the multiverse, right? He's not a hound. He's not a hound dog. That's not what he is. So on one hand, it is cool to see what is in effect the likeness of Shumagorath in the MCU. But after seeing the movie and seeing the role it played, I really hope it's not actually Shumagorath. That like Wanda was aware of Shumagorath, or she saw an image of Shumagorath in the Darkhold and then copied its likeness and like that's this being now. But I really hope it's not the actual Shumagorath, because if it is, that would be hugely disappointing. But moving on, one of the really cool things that I loved about this, and I'm glad they kept it in, was basically America Chavez's addiction from the comics, right? Her addiction to pizza. Here's the thing. So in the comics, whenever America Chavez travels from one dimension to the next or uses any real measure of her power, she like eats pizza in order to regain her energy. It's kind of her thing, and it's cool because like you'll have like these random moments, right? She'll use her powers and then like it'll just skip to her eating pizza. She'll be talking to people, but like she'll just be eating pizza because it's the thing that she needs, right? Like she's just addicted to it, and it's a cool thing. I absolutely love it because let's be honest with ourselves, we're all addicted to good pizza. But the next Easter egg that I loved was actually Bruce Campbell, right? Historically, he's always appeared in Sam Raimi movies. For those of you guys who are not familiar with that, Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi are kind of like the 1-2 punch of really just the kind of dark humor, comedic horror archetype, and a lot of that goes back to the days of The Evil Dead, right? The Evil Dead was the movie that put both Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi on the map, because it would be disingenuous to say it's got a cult following. I mean, this transitions way beyond just a cult following. It really is like, it's a cultural film, right? Like it's a movie that just defined that type of movie. It's great, right? Now, eventually it did give us Army of Darkness, which, you know, depending on who you talk to, but the Evil Dead original is really the best one. And so because of that, Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi have just always gone hand in hand. And so it makes sense that you would always see a Bruce Campbell cameo in a Sam Raimi movie. So that's why you get that. If you guys never saw Evil Dead, you should go check it out. Be aware, it's got some crazy parts. Like when the chick's sitting on the chair and like she gets possessed because like they're doing the card game and the girl's trying to pretend like she can read minds, and so the other girl on the chair literally just starts reading off all the cards, and then she turns around and her face is all screwed up. You know what I'm talking about? Like it's just one of those really freaky moments. But yeah, Evil Dead was a great movie. But moving on our list of Easter eggs here, the Ultron Sentries. Now I loved this, right? I loved this whole thing because there was a lot of speculation in the early days of the trailers and everything, and rightfully so, because contextually it made sense, that it was basically the Iron Legion, right? Basically as it had been created by Tony Stark, Iron Man. And it was in effect not really Ultron Sentries or anything predicated on Ultron beyond the fact that it was a suit of armor around the world. I did love that these were modeled more in line with Ultron. They were just like the Ultron Sentry robots, but this is a great Easter egg from the events of Ultron Forever, for those of you guys who are familiar with that. So the idea behind Ultron Forever, and it's not an exact copy, again, just more of an Easter egg here. In Ultron Forever, this was a story that was originally teased, I think, in Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. God, Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. When Captain America was yanked, what was it? Okay, what was it, guys? Those of you guys who read it, refresh my memory here. Was it 500 years in the future, I think? Because the first time Captain America traveled, when the Time Stone first took him, I want to say it was 50 years in the future. And then it was 500 years into the future. Then there was a third stop, and that's when he realized that future Franklin Richards was immortal, right? Which made sense. He has the ability to alter reality. And then it was like 50,000 years in the future. But whichever time period it was, essentially Ultron had conquered everything, including Asgard. And in fact, Ultron Prime had killed Odin and then took the Odin Force and sat on the throne of Asgard as like the Allfather, right? Like Allfather Ultron. It was nuts. It was really, really cool. But this is like an Easter egg to that, because it was was Ultron Sentries everywhere. It's also a nice little Easter egg to the events of Age of Ultron in the comics, where Ultron from the future used Vision as a vector to send himself into the past and start creating all these Ultron robots to conquer the world. So that was cool, right? Just little Easter eggs, right? Both from the Marvel Cinematic Universe itself, right? The suit around like a suit of armor around the world, and then, you know, from the actual comics themselves, which I absolutely love. The one thing I will say I'm a little disappointed about is we didn't actually get to see Iron Man. And I think the reason for that, I'm not going to swear by this, but I want to say there was some interview or something that I saw where they were talking about that, and they were basically, or maybe it was a tweet, maybe it was from Matt Ramos, I don't remember. Matt, if you're watching this video, what's up? So I think the whole thing behind that is basically that, like, Reed Richards was the one that basically created the Iron Legion and actually got it right, as opposed to Tony Stark, who screwed it up. And so it's a cool little thing, right? I absolutely love that little Easter egg there. But the next one, of course, the Illuminati themselves. Now, while this doesn't seem like an Easter egg as much as like a point of the movie, it actually is an Easter egg, especially with Reed being a part of it. So the reason why is because, again, during this movie borrowed, like, one of the things to know from the multiversal aspect, this movie borrowed heavily from Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. That's why I say everybody should go check out the videos that I have on Hickman's Avengers, New Avengers, and Secret Wars from 2015. We'll have a link in the description for it, but you should all go check it. It's a phenomenal story. But basically, when the multiverse was collapsing, that Reed Richards had constructed a bridge, and what it would do is it would allow him to see into the multiverse. Technically, the bridge already existed, he just adjusted it a little bit, but it allowed them to see into the multiverse. And so basically, they would take turns, right? So you would have Namor and Black Panther, or you would have Reed, or you'd have Iron Man or something like that, or Beast, Hank McCoy. They would all basically just watch the bridge itself to see how other realities were handling the incursion events, to see if there was a way to stop the incursions without blowing up worlds. And basically what you ended up seeing were like these alternate realities with different versions of the Illuminati. So one group might consist of Magneto and Professor X and like Captain America and, I don't know, like Iron Man, right? And maybe like a few other people. Whereas one might be composed of characters that traditionally are villains, but in that reality, they're all heroes. So it would really just like shift and change around. But I say that because while the Illuminati in this movie are aware of the multiverse, they are not a singular entity in the multiverse. It's not like there's only one Illuminati. America Chavez stated that, right? She said, like, every time you dream, you will see like alternate reality versions of yourself. And she said, there's only one of me in the entire multiverse. Now, she'd only been to 72 different realities, but I feel like that's a big enough sample size to know if there are any universes out there where only one person exists across the whole multiverse. You know, like if there's only one Reed, she would have figured that out. If there was only one Professor X, she would have figured that out, that kind of a thing. But, you know, basically it's this Easter egg pointing to the idea that the Illuminati is a universal concept, meaning there is an Illuminati in every single universe, presumably in the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the next Easter egg that we spotted was the Baxter Foundation. Now, the Baxter Foundation, in terms of that name, does not exist in the comics. That's an Easter egg in reference to the Future Foundation. Now, this is a really, really cool concept, and I'm really hoping we see it in the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So the way this worked is you had what was called the Singularity Conference or something like that. Anyway, it was a coming together of like the world's scientists. And what Reed Richards had realized is that as far as he was concerned, the world's scientists were basically dumb. They were limited in their view and scope of all existence, which makes sense because Reed's smarter than basically all of them. And so he's able to look outside the box in a way that scientists traditionally aren't able to do, because even among scientists themselves, they're rigid and structured in their view of science. And so what he ended up doing was breaking away and forming the Future Foundation under the idea that the best people suited to come up with ideas to solve the problems that plague humanity in the present and in the future are kids, because they can actually think outside the box. They're amazing at divergent thinking. And so because of that, the Future Foundation was a coming together of younger people. Now, obviously it's being changed around a little bit because Christine Palmer is not a kid, right? She's just part of the Baxter Foundation. So I do love that idea from the main Marvel Universe. So they took the Future Foundation and rolled it over into this, renamed it a little bit. But I'm hoping that in the future, we actually see the pure Future Foundation of just younger people. Because on that team, you had like Franklin and you had Valaria, which for those of you guys who don't know, and we'll talk about them here in a second, they're hugely important. But there were some cool moments, right? It was a cool little reference to the Future Foundation itself. But moving on here, of course, Professor X and the X-Men theme song, which I absolutely adore. adored. Oh my God, it was so great to see that and to hear it, right? Like as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh my God. I mean, we talked about that in the last video that we did. Absolutely adored it, right? It was something that I had really been looking forward to. And I didn't know how much I needed it until that video came out where that guy basically redid the Marvel intro, but with the X-Men theme. You know what I'm talking about? Everybody's seen that video. It was great. I didn't realize how much I needed that until we got it. And I have no doubt they're going to do that with the X-Men film in the MCU, which I'm just absolutely dying to see. Of course, we also got the yellow floating chair. You know, I never really had anything against Xavier in the wheelchair, but as someone who got into this whole geek culture comic space because of X-Men the animated series way back in the 90s, it was just nice, right? It was just a nice little nod to be able to see Xavier. Now, here's one of the things that's kind of cool if you sort of read between the lines. If Xavier exists in that Illuminati universe, it would stand to reason the X-Men likely exist with him. So the question that I would ask here is, what was going on with the X-Men in that universe? If we assume they exist, are they alive? Are they just training? Did they die fighting Thanos? Because a part of me wants to believe it would have been cool if they died fighting Thanos, because that in and of itself would have been an Easter egg to Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, when you had like the cabal of Thanos, right? The Black Order, Namor the Submariner and those guys, when Namor started to realize that for Thanos and the Black Order, it wasn't just about destroying incursive worlds during the incursions, it was about just like killing everything on those worlds and like a lust for death and destruction. But there was one point where like they basically fought Xavier and they killed all of his X-Men, and then, or at least what was left of his X-Men, the contingent that Xavier sent towards him, towards Thanos and them, and then they tortured Xavier and forced him to call the rest of the X-Men so the Black Order could kill all the other X-Men as well and then destroy the Earth. It was a really, really cool moment in the comics, but nonetheless, right, it was a cool thing. One of the other things that I loved about this is the Xavier quote from the movie, just because someone stumbles and loses their way does not mean they're lost forever. That's a quote from Days of Future Past. So I love that they carried that over. Now, again, there might be some theories that come out about that, right? Did Xavier always exist in the Illuminati universe? Was Xavier plucked out of the Days of Future Past universe and brought here? And that's where he's basically been in that reality ever since? Is he quite literally out of time, right? Is he out of his own universe and in a new one instead? I mean, I doubt that's the case. He's probably native to the Illuminati universe. I don't really see a reason why it would be anything other than that unless they just decide to change it, but it is a cool quote. If anything, it would probably showcase the idea that Xavier, in terms of personality, is basically exactly the same across the whole multiverse. Maybe there's some evil versions of Xavier, which I would definitely want to see. There's a what if story where Professor X became the Juggernaut. That was cool. But beyond that, you know, Xavier is seemingly the same everywhere. But this goes into probably one of the best Easter eggs here, right? Which is Susan Storm, Franklin Richards, and Valaria Richards. Now, Susan Storm, here's the thing. People sleep on how powerful Susan Storm is. You know, with her invisibility, it speaks for itself, right? Like, I can't see her. Cool, I guess. But like when it comes to her force fields, that's a whole different beast. So like with her force fields, like when she was fighting the Mad Celestials, she held off the power of Celestials, right? Now, granted, these Celestials weren't looking to destroy the world. They were just looking to destroy like Sue and Franklin and Reed and Ben Grimm and Johnny and those guys. I mean, if they wanted to, they could have obliterated the world, which probably would have killed Sue and them because she couldn't maintain her force field forever. And even if she did, she would have ran out of oxygen and they would have suffocated and died. So she's not omnipotent is the point that I'm getting at. But her force fields are wildly capable. Now, Valaria, she is a wildly obscure character, and I would say you know nothing about her if you've never read the comics. Valaria is as smart as Reed. And depending on what comic you're reading, she's actually smarter than Reed. The Valaria is the smartest person in the world. But it depends. More recently, characters like Moon Girl, so like Lunella Lafayette, she's shown up and she's like ridiculously intelligent. But Valaria is the daughter of Reed, who is as smart as Reed Richards and Dr. Doom. She's an absolute genius. In fact, she was the one that figured out that the incursions couldn't be stopped in Avengers and New Avengers. And so she literally sent a note to her dad and was like, you can't win. It's time to figure out how not to lose, which was a really, really cool concept. They ended up figuring that out. But nonetheless, right, having Sue and Valaria is really impressive in and of itself, because Valaria is a member of the Future Foundation, which I would love to see in the main MCU. Franklin is wildly powerful. scale. And in fact, it's been established multiple times over the years in Marvel Comics that with Galactus being basically a guy from a previous universe that was reborn into the new universe when it was created, that's what'll happen with Galactus and Franklin. That the two of them will be the last surviving beings in the universe when it's destroyed, when it basically comes to its heat death end, right? Its natural end. And that they would end up merging into a more powerful being that would be reborn in the new universe. The relationship between Franklin and Galactus is hugely significant, right? It's a very, very cool relationship between the two of them just because of the level of power they possess, the kind of things that they can do, like the Abraxas saga, different things like that. It's a really, really cool thing. So what we're talking about here are wildly powerful and capable beings that are just Easter eggs that are referenced. I don't think it's an accidental thing. I don't think it's an accidental line. Right? I don't think it was improv by John Krasinski. I think it was written there intentionally because we're going to see them in the future of the MCU. The real question is, how badly are they going to nerf Franklin Richards? Because I feel like they're not going to make him a character that can alter reality on a universal scale. However, it would be cool to see this, 7-year-old kid running around that could basically do everything you saw the Celestials doing in the Eternals film. Because he could. It's cool. But beyond that, one of the coolest things about this, and this is what I loved, that in some ways, the Illuminati played the role of the Omniversal Development Court. That basically what you had here, at least as Christine had explained it to Doctor Strange, is that the numerical designation for the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Earth 616. Now, a lot of people were kind of baffled by that because they're like, no, that's the numerical designation for Marvel Comics. But remember, the Marvel Comics multiverse and the Marvel movies multiverse are two separate multiverses now. They didn't used to be, right? It's seemingly they weren't the same before. And that kind of seems to be what was really going on, is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had a numerical designation in Marvel Comics. It was like 1 and then a bunch of 9s. But what happened, seemingly what's taken place here, is that where the Marvel Cinematic Universe multiverse before the events of Loki maybe was tied into the comics, or it was just something that we as fans came up with, that even if that's the case, that multiverse now has been rejoined with the rest of the movie multiverse. So it's back where it's supposed to be. And now it's part of that whole multiverse there. So basically, Earth 616 is the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Earth 616 is the main Marvel Comics universe. So it's cool to see that. And it kind of allows a little bit of crossover there, if for no other reason than just based on names. But Christine Palmer in the Illuminati universe had basically said, like, that's the numerical designation that we've given to your reality. Now, in Marvel Comics, that was the Omniversal Development Court that did that. The Omniversal Magistrate Saturnine had actually explained that to Captain Britain, that like they gave the number 616 to the main Marvel universe. It's the first time in Marvel Comics that universes are given a numerical designation. We didn't know that before. It was just an alternate reality where stuff happened. But once that numerical designation was given, that forever became the standard number for the main Marvel Comics universe. So basically, it's the MCU version of what the Omniversal Development Court did. It's a cool little Easter egg, right? A nice little reference there. But moving beyond that, we really get one of the coolest moments, and I think this is going to be a huge source of debate among comic fans and people who are fans of the movies. So if you guys recall, we do have that moment where Wong and Wanda travel to Wundagore Mountain. Now, in the comics, this is a nice little Easter egg and a reference to the fact that Wundagore is a location where Wanda was basically taken and raised by the High Evolutionary, or at least for a time until she was, went off and did her own thing. But you also had that place being the location where Chthon had basically been imprisoned at a previous point in time, or at least the portal that gives you access to his dimension where he was imprisoned, but a portion of his essence is still there, which was gifted to Wanda, if you want to call it a gift. And that's how Wanda ended up gaining a portion of chaos magic, or the ability to manipulate chaos magic, was because of her time in Wundagore Mountain and being touched by Chthon. So what this does is, right off the bat, this tells me, like, as soon as I saw that, when Wong was like, the Darkhold as you had it was basically a copy. The original texts are written here by the first demon to ever practice dark magic. I was immediately like, Chthon. That's exactly who that is. But a part of me also wants to believe there'd be a little bit of fan service, in the sense that in that moment when, or at least near the end of the movie, when America Chavez had basically opened the portal and was gonna push Wanda through, and it had like the hellish dimension on the other side, that looked like the realm of Mephisto. So I think it'd be cool if there was a bit of crossover between the two, because technically speaking, the realm of Chthon is called the Flickering Realm. And I didn't see that realm like changing, right? Like the Flickering Realm is such that like it changes all the time. So it could look really, really snowy, and then in the blink of an eye, it would look like hell. It would just fluctuate, and then it might be really, really lush and green, and it would just change all the time. I didn't see that there. Like, it maintained the same look from the time the portal was open until seemingly the time the portal closed. Although I'm not 100% sure if that portal ever closed. Maybe it did. I don't remember off the top of my head. But regardless, that looked like the realm of Mephisto. And I feel like it would have been a really cool thing if basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe took the concept of Mephisto and merged it with the concept of Chthon, and basically goes from there. So like those individuals who manipulate the Darkhold, that's Chthon / Mephisto corrupting you. And then ultimately he'll steal your soul if enough time passes, or he'll take it from you, or whatever the case happens to be. But it was a cool little thing. Right now, moving beyond that, of course, we got some cool little moments. I mean, I guess it's cool we got Anson Mount as Black Bolt. I don't know. Black Bolt as a character always sucks, so it doesn't matter to me. But of course, Peggy Carter had the reference that she can do this all day, which I think we were all kind of hoping she would say, right? You know, I thought it was cool. Like, as soon as she said that, I was like, yes! So that was nice to see. Kind of an obscure Easter egg that we spotted here. Wanda's entrance in Kamar Taj when she was showing herself in the reflections and then finally came through the mirror, that was reminiscent of the Ring, which I absolutely loved, because the Ring, of course, basically being that little girl who was seemingly pure evil and was like killing people. In turn, Wanda kind of manifests in the same way, so sort of mirroring that horror element, which is one of the things I love about Sam Raimi, is he borrows from like other horror genres that were iconic in some form or fashion. And then of course we got the heads of the Living Tribunals. Now, the heads of the Living Tribunal was cool because seemingly this is maybe where the statue head came from in Loki, when all that stuff was just being teleported to, you know, the end of all things, right, where the He Who Remains basically resided. That was cool. I don't really know what the significance is because, of course, they weren't just random statue heads. Their eyes were lit up. So I don't know if the Living Tribunal, as we know him, actually exists, or if it's just a realm of Living Tribunal heads. I have no idea what to make of that. Because there's only one Living Tribunal across the whole multiverse in Marvel Comics. So maybe with the Marvel Cinematic Universe being its own multiverse, things are different there. And there's a Living Tribunal in every universe who resides or presides over that universe, and that's basically it. I have no clue how this works. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I want to know your theories on the whole Living Tribunal thing. But yeah, you know, it was cool. Of course, at the end of the movie, we got Clea. We'll do a video about her separately because I think that's a pretty significant thing. I'll also do a video on Comics explaining Clea. Right, I imagine people are going to be interested in that. Marvel Comics, Clea Explained. People are going to want that. That's probably going to go up on maybe Monday or Tuesday. I mean, I usually give it like the first weekend when it comes to a movie this big. If you didn't see it in the first weekend, there's a good chance you're probably not going to see it for a little while. Anybody who was in that much of a rush and wanted to avoid spoilers that bad will have seen the movie over the course of this weekend. So yeah, after the weekend, all bets are off. But nonetheless, you know, it's cool. The movie was great. I absolutely loved it. I had a blast watching this whole thing. So because we're running up on 30 minutes here, we'll do the spoiler review in a different video because I didn't realize it was going to take us this long to cover all these Easter eggs. So we'll do the spoiler review in a separate video. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.